Hey, good morning, everyone. My name is Rebecca Smith-Aldridge. I'm the co-founder and board president of the advisory board of the Sustainable Libraries Initiative. I'm joined here with Matthew Bollerman, our other co-founder of the Sustainable Libraries Initiative and vice president of our advisory board. And Alex is here to support us from the Sustainable Libraries Initiative. He's our boots on the ground who helps us out every day, helping folks that are involved in the program have a successful experience. So you'll get to know him pretty well over the course of your experience with the Sustainable Libraries Initiative. Our guide this morning is to give you an introduction to what the heck is the Sustainable Libraries Initiative and help you understand as a member of your library association what you now get for free thanks to our partnership with your library association. Today we're here thanks to our new memo of understanding with the Maine Library Association, but you may be here from a different state that also has an arrangement with us. So if you are affiliated with any of the groups you see the logo for on this slide, you are in the right place. And anytime I say MLA or Maine Library Association in your brain, you just need to swap out your library association for that. And it all still works because the arrangement is the same with each of these organizations. And we just want to take a minute here to thank these organizations for their leadership in reaching out and agreeing to work with us to help accelerate work in this area throughout your organization. And so we're so pleased to see you all here today. Matthew and I are going to do a little presentation, and then we're going to have plenty of time for questions that you may have. Alex is going to share some links in the chat. If you've got a question that pops into your head while we're talking, you can put it in the chat or hold it till we get to the Q&A. You'll be able to unmute and ask your question. You don't have to type them in. And then when we follow up with you after the meeting, you will receive the slides, the recording of the event, and any other things that might crop up that we think would be helpful for you in the course of our conversation here today. So, Matthew, you ready to go?
Yes.
All right. So the opportunity that your association has brought to you as part of your membership with their association is a free 12-month membership with the Sustainable Libraries Initiative. So we're going to go through what the benefits of that are to you and your library and how to access those benefits as part of this morning's presentation. We're also going to point out that this arrangement allows for your organization to receive a discount to go through the Sustainable Library Certification. And we're going to do a brief introduction to what is that certification program, why you might be interested in it. And if you decide like, oh, that is something I'm very interested in, we have a second webinar that focuses just on that experience, where you can hear more about that program and from folks who have gone through the program. So you can hear from people just like yourselves who have gone through it, what the experience was like, what the benefits were for their organization, and how it's helped them meet their goals to be a more sustainable library. We're also going to define what is a sustainable library for you here today, because we think that's pretty important to understand the context in which we're operating in this work. So we're pretty confident you found your way here because you're of a like mind, but it's never good to assume. So just to set the stage here, the Sustainable Libraries Initiative, Matthew and I had an idea almost 10 years ago now, I guess more than 10 years ago, 12 years ago now. We were at a conference outside of industry. It was called the U.S. Green Building Council Conference, and hearing about the construction industry and all the work they're doing on sustainable design and making healthier built environments. And Matt and I were like really into local projects we were both involved in, trying to get sustainable design front and center in those projects. And in the train ride home from the conference, really started to think bigger about why libraries were not more of a leader on the topic of sustainability and why it was such a hard sell to adopt sustainable design and facility projects. And it led to this very big conversation about how to generate leadership in our profession on this topic, and recognizing some of the barriers we were up against back in 2012 and in the subsequent years on some of these topics related to climate change and the politicization of these issues. So when we really started to think about the topic, we realized it was much bigger, obviously, than the two of us just raising our hands and say, let's do something. We found a lot of like-minded people in our own association at the time, the New York Library Association, who wanted to help as well think this through, because we weren't seeing leadership on the topic at the level we were hoping for in any other spot. So it was definitely homegrown. We really adopted the principle of we just want to make make progress here. We know it might not be perfect. We don't have all the answers, but we really could see the need to do something. So that's been our job over the past 12 years that we've taken on as volunteers, is to think through how to help our profession develop more leadership on this topic to accelerate the work we know is necessary in the face of climate change and the different challenges you may be facing as well in your particular geography to create strong, sustainable libraries that are contributing to thriving communities in the face of all of the disruption that we are faced with in the current year 2024, which we could talk the whole hour just about those itemized list of disruptions. So that's really been our job, is that we've taken on, we've felt if it's not us, who else is doing it? And that's every person we meet who says we feel the same way. We say, come on in. That's what we're doing here. So that's the premise of the Sustainable Libraries Initiative. And then over time, we've had to think through, how are we going to develop tools that make this doable for libraries? That's what we heard over and over again, that people want to do work in this area. They get overwhelmed by thinking about it because it's such a systemic issue. So when you think about climate change and it affecting the entire planet, and oh my God, what does this mean? Is the world ending? The predictions are pretty dire that we are faced with. And as we think through, how are we going to be successful in the face of these as institutions, as well as neighborhoods and a local and global community? Again, it can be really overwhelming. We're talking about economic issues, environmental issues, very acute issues like major storms and pandemics that are, really disruptive to our world and threatening our health and livelihood. So it's something that we ourselves sometimes would feel kind of paralyzed by. Where do you even start? This is such a massive issue. So as we think through the predictions from climate scientists, which I know we're all getting bummed out as I'm talking here, but I promise we're going to bring it back around. This idea that the climate change impacts are being felt very strongly right now. They are going to continue to get worse for at least another 30 years, which is the lifespan of most of our careers in libraries. And so it's going to be a common issue we are dealing with on a regular basis that will disrupt our processes, our business operations, the lives of our library workers, our community members, the folks that we serve, society in general. So confronting this and addressing the fact that we now have to act more quickly than perhaps we had been to plan, to protect, to adapt, as well as confronting the need to continue to try to lessen the impacts of climate change on future generations, that's a tall order. And again, overwhelming, might be feeling paralyzed. Oh my gosh, where do I start? So the dire effects of climate change are undeniable. We've seen it from a severe storm standpoint, massive heat waves, extended heat waves. It's really something that's affecting people's health on a wide scale level. And there is a very, I would say, almost depressing, but also hopeful editorial that came out in 2021. It was published in just about every medical journal, professional medical journal across the world, calling on the medical profession to step up and own their role in doing good work on this topic, noting that it's going to profoundly negatively affect the health of every child on the planet, which is a very big wake-up call to many people who are interested in this topic and the lives of the children they are helping to raise or love in their lives. And I've been advised to also mention pets, that, not all of us have kids. I don't have kids, but thinking about the people that we care about most in our lives are going to be negatively impacted. And most of us got into this profession because we really do care about people and connecting them with information and making sure they know how to understand that information and thrive regardless of what's going on in the world. So this is part of our work, thinking through on a larger scale, really a call to action to think about what you can do from your sphere of influence, just like the medical community is doing. So we've been working in partnership with many folks across the profession over the past 12 years. Matthew and I served on the first iteration of the American Library Association's Council Committee on Sustainability, which issued this call to action, trying to make the case for library professionals and library workers and library trustees and library friends groups to really start integrating this thinking into their planning, into service and program design, into facility master plans, recognizing that there's no time to waste, reiterating what we're hearing at the international level. This is code red, no more time to wait. Let's go. Now is the time. There is urgency here for work to be done. And here we are trying to position ourselves for that work and to do so in a way that is not overwhelming, intimidating, causing paralysis at the same time. So I would just want to say that that's one of our guiding principles that we have tried to adopt throughout our tenure, is to come from a place of hope, that there is hope by working together and finding new pathways and adaptation strategies so that we don't feel overwhelmed. We aren't just run over by what's happening. We don't feel helpless in these moments. Action breeds hope, and we truly believe that. And that's how we've designed our program. And we try to generate our community of practice as well that you are now part of. So you may be aware that sustainability is actually the newest core value from the American Library Association. It was adopted in 2019, thanks to, I think, a lot of the work that happened in New York on this project, but quickly gained traction at the national level once we were able to advocate for it in a new way, with language that more people were adopting, understanding, and particularly because they were seeing the effects more front and center in their lives, perhaps. But this was adopted in 2019 and survived the task force that presented a pared down list of core values that was adopted in January of 2024 to the Council of the American Library Association. And this is, I think, a really important moment because it gives you a foothold to talk about this topic in your organization in a way that's acceptable. It's just the way we're going to be moving forward as a profession, and really embracing the idea that every job has to be a climate job in order for our communities to be successful. And really thinking about this adage that we borrow from Project Drawdown, which is an amazing group of scientists, amazing community of leaders, community organizers that have been helping about the same amount of time we have to help bring science to the conversation, that facts matter, and really help to accelerate work across all professions, that we all embrace this idea that it is part of our responsibility. You're going to be doing work at work anyway. You might as well do it with part of this being your lens of how to do that work. And so we're going to talk more about how to do that, some of the common language around this topic, and how that translates into some of the resources you now have access to thanks to your membership. So I just want to unpack this idea of climate action, because we hear that term like we hear sustainability a lot, and Matt's going to more fully explain the definition of sustainability in a few minutes. But climate action is something many of us are very interested in, but we don't all use the same definition of climate action. And so these are some of the common phrases and words we're using that make sure we're all talking about the same thing, that it's really three component parts add up to climate action that we need to take overall as a community. So thinking through really traditional climate action, which we've been hearing about for decades, which is to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, which is the driver of climate change, and understanding that this work has to still go on. We still need to mitigate the effects of climate change. Even though we might not make it 100% better for us during our lifetime, it's going to matter an awful lot to the folks that come after us. So keeping the drumbeat going on reducing greenhouse gas emissions from how we're running our buildings, how we transport ourselves and goods, and what our impact is on the natural environment that helps to mitigate greenhouse gas emissions. But that has to be concurrent with adaptation to what's already happening because of the impacts of climate change. So being prepared in the face of what's predicted for your geography to understand what's likely to happen with severe weather, extended heat waves, flooding in your particular region of the world, and thinking through how to adjust, how to be prepared at home, how to be prepared at work, how to minimize disruptions to library service to people who really rely on the services that we provide, particularly in those moments of preparation and recovery during severe events. And then making sure combined in these two areas is this third component, which is justice and how we're making decisions, who is impacted by our decisions, and understanding that while we may be all in on mitigation and adaptation, if we don't do it with a true commitment to justice to make sure that the decisions we make about our libraries, about our communities, are respecting everyone's lived experiences in those communities, we may be doing more harm than good. So really respecting, of course, many of the tenets we've already adopted in our profession around equity, diversity, and inclusion, but again, thinking about those in climate action planning, facilities planning, partnerships we seek out in our communities to make sure all are heard in these planning and preparation activities that we're doing. So that aspect of just treating people with kindness and respect and empathy, that's a big part of the work we do as well. If you join the certification program, you'll see we're not just talking about buildings, we're not just talking about recycling, we're also talking about social cohesion and how we bring people together to be stronger neighbors, more kind neighbors with more empathy for each other. So we're all considering how to move forward together and not leaving folks behind or everyone for themselves. That's not the mentality we're interested in at all. So we feel we align well with all professional values across the board. So you may be aware that in June, the Sustainable Libraries Initiative and the American Library Association announced a national climate action strategy for library that really is trying to operationalize that little formula I just showed you. So if you were interested to learn more about that, this is now available. You can find it on our website, right? The big Alex has got it as the first thing you see when you click on the website right now, because we think it's huge news to help more of our profession get on the same page about where to put our time, energy, and money. So if you want to dig into that, we encourage you to read it. There'll be a lot more PR and education coming about that through some of our other partnerships with Web Junction and other entities across the country. But the strategy itself, just one page, it describes exactly what I just talked about with the climate action formula. And then you've got the implementation guide, which really unpacks each of these topics, gives you case studies and more information. It gives you simple steps to get started. It gives you some of the talking points you may need if you live in a more conservative area of the country. Very well thought out by the working group that helped advise that, both leadership from the Sustainable Libraries Initiative and the American Library Association community of folks that have been doing good work on this topic for many, many years, really elevating it and getting it, I think, into the hands of more folks that are interested in doing work in this area. But our hope is that every library starts to adopt this thinking and integrating this into its strategic and facility plans. So the idea here, obviously, is at the mammoth scale of the planet and climate change, and making sure we all have respect, empathy, and understanding for each other is no small feat. No one industry, no one political organization is going to be able to turn the tide on this or have the level of impact that's going to be necessary in the coming decade. So our goal is collective impact, that we're trying to find where our sphere of influence is, what we can do as a profession, and let's get everyone moving in the same direction. And that's a big part of the work we do with the Sustainable Libraries Initiative. We know everyone has an amazing amount of ideas. You have your niche areas you love doing work in, but the truth is, if we don't all get on the same page and pull in the same direction in reducing greenhouse gas emissions, helping ourselves and our communities prepare for what is coming, and doing so with a justice perspective, this is not going to go as well as it should, as well as it can, as well as we know it can based on what's possible. So pulling in the same direction is something we've been trying to work on for the past 12 years. And we feel like the core value at ALA, the new National Climate Action Strategy, the work your library associations are doing in partnership with us, it's all helping us get closer to that idea that, yes, it might be very cool to do this thing over here, but what if we got on board with the big stuff that we know needs to get done and make sure we're taking care of that before we go down the line on some of the other ideas we may have. Let's all get the basics down and build that foundation for a stronger future. So this is the definition that we use of a sustainable library, which actually emerged years after we named the project the Sustainable Libraries Initiative, because these became the calling cards of libraries in our certification program. These were the driving attributes for public libraries, academic libraries, and school librarians in our program. When we really started to look at what described a sustainable library, these are the 4 key characteristics. And all of our resources, the certification program, the community of practice, all drives towards these 4 attributes of a sustainable library. And it starts from the inside out. And this is a very big tenet of the work that we do believe it comes from the inside out. That if your organization, your policies, how you treat library workers, how we run our buildings is not done in an authentic way, you will not be a viable partner for this work in your community, on your campus, in your school. So really starting looking inward to, again, policies, procedures, how we treat library workers, the healthy workspaces that we should be in. That's where the work starts. And then looking outwards to be a true catalyst for social cohesion and civic participation, which is what is called upon for our communities to have the necessary tools to work together to solve the local issues they are being confronted with, whether they be related to climate change or not. And so seeing libraries as a catalyst for that work is a hallmark of a sustainable library. And then the two more perhaps traditional things that you probably thought we were going to say is that work on reducing greenhouse gas emissions from the inside out. Any control you have over purchasing, facilities, transportation, are we making smart decisions about greenhouse gas emissions and lowering them? And are we actively participating in adapting to make sure we are more resilient in the face of what is happening? That's resilience on a personal level, a professional level, an organizational level, and a community level. And that's a lot of work, right, to think that all through. So seeing examples of how libraries are doing this moving forward is a big part of what we've been doing, is telling the stories of libraries who are doing this work, doing it well, helping you iterate on work that's come before, and making sure you're not starting from scratch so we can all move faster on these topics. So my favorite quote really for work life is this quote from Alvin Toffler, that you can't just talk about the big things without doing the small things to make sure those small things go in the right direction. And that's what we're all about, is taking this big, huge topic and bringing it down to practical, bite-sized pieces that any library of any size, any budget, any number of staff can make progress with and feel really good about the direction you're leading your library in. Now, a huge part of that is how you just think, your mindset moving forward. And when I mentioned before, the sustainability being adopted as a core value, Matthew and I feel that was a major turning point in this work, because we all started talking in the same language about what we meant about a very complex topic in the triple bottom line of sustainability. So I'm going to turn this over to Matthew to talk about this definition, because it's really, even if you didn't sign up for the certification program, starting to think through this lens is going to make a big difference for you.
That's exactly right. Thanks, Rebecca. Take a breath. That was an awesome introduction. I really appreciate that. I learn something every time I hear it, so that's good too. So yeah, the triple bottom line. So as we started this work back in 20 whatever, the last decade, we were really kind of sometimes struggling with how to make it clear for those who would listen to us about what this meant. What does it mean for me in the chair that I sit in the job I do each day? And over time, I think it got crystallized and crystallized and crystallized down to using this definition. And so it provided that lens, it provided that opportunity for how to think through the decisions that you make. And that's where I find it most useful personally, is when I'm faced with making a choice. So for instance, here at the Hauppauge Public Library, we are buying new signs for outside to make our building a little more visible. So I had to talk to my vendor and say, hey, what are the different aspects to the sign? Well, it's going to be lit. There's material that it's made. Who gets to make that? Is it a local company? Does it get farmed in from somewhere else? But I added all different levels of understanding to just buying a sign that maybe I wouldn't have done before I was involved with this work, because each of those choices has an impact. And I'm trying to balance those three things: the budget, what the impact is of the materials and where I'm going to put it, and then who makes it, who is the recipient of this, who gets paid for the labor. And I want to make sure that all those choices align with the values of my library and my community. And so that's what I'm starting to use more and more and more. Now, you may say to yourself, wait a second. It takes me a long time just to make a decision about buying toilet paper. I have to add all these other components to it. And the answer is yes, you do, because you can't unhear this, right? So this is a real thing. When we make these choices, there are impacts to all different areas, and we should be cognizant and thoughtful about those. But there are a lot of resources out there that can help with those decisions, and people have done some work to help you figure out that things are meeting these other criteria. Ready for the next? So, as Rebecca said, we have this wonderful Sustainable Libraries Initiative, and I think the best part of it is like-minded people, that we're bringing folks together from around the country. We are coast to coast at this time. We have libraries who are involved from California to Maine. Hello, Maine in the house. And even in other countries. We've been speaking with folks in Canada. We've been speaking to folks in Australia who are trying to find like-minded people who see libraries as being the place to make a difference, right? It's in our mission to make a difference in our communities. So why wouldn't we want to figure out how to do that when it relates to these most pressing topics that we have to deal with, and the world that's changing? Especially, I'm thinking of you, Gulf Coast, Florida right now, as you're getting ready for, a real barreling storm coming your way. So I hope if people have family down there that they're doing all right. But basically the community practice, we get together, we talk about things, we share ideas, we have emails, we got Facebook pages, we gather, it's all that kind of stuff, right? Just to keep people connected and sharing those great ideas that are coming out and answering questions, right? Because other people may have gone down that road before, but we love the ones that stump us, because it's like, oh, I've never thought about that. What is that all about? What's we have next there, Rebecca? So here's what you get when you join us for 12 months. We have a whole behind curtain number one, or all sorts of different things that you get when you join us. And those include policies. Yes, I like, Rebecca, you started this deck with the sexiest one is policies, right? So, but it's important, right? That takes time to write those. If you're at a small library, you don't have a lot of help. You might not have access to an attorney. Maybe you do, maybe it's whatever. But the point is to get good policies, sets the example, because it outlives your time at the institution. And that was something that we care very much about, is to make sure that it's not just Matt's vision for how my library should operate. It's not just my passion project. It's the libraries making these choices. So getting those governing boards, getting those folks who set the policy for your institution, are making those changes so that they become systemic, not just one-offs, or just, like I said, something that we're passionate about for a little while. And so when you join us, you get that free membership for the 12 months by being a member of your library association. Then you can start to read the good work that's already been done out there. And there are some really excellent policies out there to choose from. Training, another good one. How do you do this stuff? Well, we've done some of the work for you on some of the great ideas out there, and this is ongoing. We try to have trainings all the time on different webinars, and you'll be able to access those and join them live and ask your questions. But there's a lot of good things out there already to try to broaden your understanding of what we're up to. This is a fun one too. This allows you to start to tell your story with data over time. You can go in and dive in and find all your old bills for utilities and start to figure out what your baseline is. And then as you start to work on your problems, whether you have lights that need to be changed, or you're using maybe an older boiler or other systems, as you're able to update different things of all your CO2 use, you can start to see that dramatic change over time. One of our favorite examples is the Suffolk Cooperative Library System, who showed somewhere, I'm going to get the percentage wrong, Rebecca, but it was like an 80% drop in electrical usage over about a like 8-9 year period. So you could see where they started and see the intentions, the decisions that were made over time to lower that down. And it wasn't, hey, we have all the money in the world and we can just run at it and there's unlimited resource. It was strategic about how they worked at it and how they worked the problem to watch that decrease happen. And so for folks who look at it and say, oh, all this stuff's a bunch of malarkey, they understand money. And when they can see that we're spending a lot less money because energy costs are just going up, the cost of them, here's us using less and less and still having a building that's lit, or we're able to charge our cars. And they actually move their fleet to some electrical vehicles. So they're actually getting now that as a renewable, as opposed to having to burn more carbon dioxide, CO2 in order to do that. Program ideas. Now this one always makes me perk up, because it's like, I am not a very creative person, so I love to steal other ideas from other folks.
You're borrowing.
Sorry,
ideas.
yes, thank you. Sorry, it's not a larceny. It's just a appreciation, so that folks that share and let us know what really good things that they've figured out on how to do it. How do we connect with different audiences? How do we make this fit for different regions? Something that might work could take a little modification to make it work for you, but this is a great place to go. And at least even like, hey, I know a B guy, but can they do this? Or you start to build those relationships about what's in your Rolodex, or to even use folks that you have worked with before to say, hey, can you put a little spin on it so we can maybe promote it this way? We feel as though this work is a little more than just Earth Day. It has to be spread out over the course of the year, and you'll get there. It might seem overwhelming, but you start with what matters to you. What environmental story, what social story, what issue is in your community today that's in your newspaper, being talked about on radio, being on the podcast, on your local Facebook moms group? What do they care about? I bet the library could put up something that would help them to start to pull that apart, to understand it, to find solutions as a community. And that's really what this is about, is to bring people into the library to figure out, how do we get this thing solved? How do we make our place better? And vendors. Sometimes we do have to spend money, and sometimes there's a lot better solutions out there by someone who's willing to provide it to us, and we buy stuff. So we offer an ability to try to look at some folks who we've worked with, or we know of, to provide those solutions that fit some other criteria that are out there, so that they're thinking similar ways. So that's a great start if you're really lost on something. So here is the ability to get started on the work. It's just a template to get going. For me, myself, I love the fact that people want to join the Sustainable Libraries Initiative. And I think it's awesome that a library would go through the certification program. My library went through it, and we did a lot of these things, but that doesn't interest me as much as people working on climate action, right? My end goal is to build leaders through the initiative, that you're acting, that you're taking that step and moving from thinking about it, worrying about it, to actually taking the agency of your facility, of your institution, and making real change in your community. So we're providing those tools for our members in order to do that. Doesn't require, and I think it's a great thing, and Rebecca's going to talk about that some more on why it's a good thing to go through, but it's not necessary. Doing the work is necessary, I believe, for libraries. And so here's a place that we give you some tools to get started. Now, I think 3 times this has happened, Rebecca, right? The ALA e-course on sustainable librarianship. We've had 3 cohorts go through. The excitement level, the engagement level has just gotten better and better and better with each group. They seem to be just taking it all in and loving it. And some of our other members help moderate those conversations. So you'll meet some really great folks out there and develop your own network. It's not necessarily a scheduled opportunity. They're periodic, but if you read our newsletter and see an opportunity, you have the potential of being one of those 25 free seats to get involved. So definitely don't hesitate when you see it, jump on it. And even if you have to pay a few bucks, ALA wins, we win. So it's a good thing. And coming soon to a library website near you is an enhanced Action Lab resource. This is going to allow you to dial into the kind of, what are the threats that our government has kind of calculated for your region? What's the data showing that could be something that you're going to need to deal with? Down by me, we have rising sea levels. We have much more rain than we used to have. We're having a lot of coastal flooding, a lot of groundwater issues. So we talk a lot about raising things up. Let's put things on post. Let's get it off the ground. We had a library here who just recently had a terrible flooding issue, and all their mechanicals were in the basement, including their whole local history room. And so the gem of the community they thought they had protected was flooded out, and all that material had to get shipped to Detroit. And it's a whole large process of cleaning it out. That library remains closed today. They're still working out how to reopen it. But those ideas of, are you prepared for it? Are you thinking out a few years when maybe not today, but are we prepared for when it does come? And that, like I talked about, the Suffolk Cooperative Library System planning for reducing their electricity, it might not happen in a linear fashion, like I get a giant pot of money and I move it this way. It could be I get some money to do this part of it, which leads to that part, which will let me get to that part. But it might be a multi-year plan, but you need a plan, and you need to have a plan for it, and you need to be having those conversations. And so does your governing body, to make sure that you can be prepared and be available when that day comes, when your community is going to need you most. And I think it's back to you, Ms. Rebecca Smith
It is.
Aldrich.
Thank you, Mr. Matthew. So we recognize that many of you on this call have already done good work in this area. We are not at all here preaching at you. We recognize the value of the work that's come before and that is going on right now in your libraries. And so the fact is, the audiences that we talk to, everyone sitting there is in a different place. So we tried to give you the most basics of today, but wanted to introduce these two resources you now have access to as well. On the left is the Roadmap to Sustainability, which is the very first resource we ever produced. And it's really a little booklet. You can get it as a little booklet or as a mobile app. We actually partnered with OCLC to produce an app. You can download it right now in the Apple or Google Play Store. And it helps you personally organize your thinking around this topic. It helps you identify what you're already doing in these areas. It helps you think through what are like the top 3 easiest things I could do next. Who are some of your like-minded partners? What did I just learn at this conference that I could apply to this thinking? So it really just helps you organize your own thinking so you're a more perhaps cohesive, coherent advocate in your organization for wider adoption of this work. You, by showing up here today, have demonstrated that you are a champion on this topic. You want to learn more. You want to be more articulate on this topic, more effective on this topic. That's what the booklet's designed to do, is help you organize your thinking, your talking points, your next plans of action. The next resource is the Sustainable Library Certification Program, which is for organizations that are ready for it. It's not for everyone, but when you've got an administrative buy-in and people really are like, we need to do something and I don't know where to start, and I really want to make a big change, this is the certification program for you. It is designed very carefully to help your organization not just check off items on a checklist, but to change organizational culture. So Matt was mentioning before about the sample policies, and wasn't it funny that I started there? But the truth is, without both the bottom-up advocacy and the top-down legacy that needs to happen at the same time, we're not going to make the difference that needs to happen for long-term change. So the certification program is designed to address organizational change level activities, as well as the fun stuff. I think of it as the fun stuff, the things that you're going to do related to programs, partnerships, collections, all that, the good stuff we just derive a lot of joy out of. Sometimes we've got to do hard work first to get there. And sometimes if we're not willing to do that, the change we're hoping to happen just doesn't ever get the traction it needs. So as we mentioned, there's a program for public and academic libraries, and literally in a few minutes, we're about to announce there's now a national program for school librarians. And that's a big moment for us because that's been a New York only program for a very long time. Public and academics anywhere in the country, and now we're discovering possibly in other countries as well, this is really working. And we have enough folks that have finished it and are willing to tell that story of how it affected them. We're really confident about this program at this point. You know, when we first created it, we're kind of like, I hope that works. But really, as Matt always says, the proof of concept is there now with a number of libraries that have gone through here. And I hope you're seeing the smiling face that I'm seeing, which is Hazel Ansrud from the Curtis Memorial Library, the first library in Maine to jump in and give this a try. So for folks in the Maine Library Association, I bet you already know Hazel. But if you don't, get to know her because she's a phenomenal, one-of-a-kind person who helped lead her library with the leadership of her library director, who recognized the power of what this could do for them in their community. So the goal here is that we're thinking holistically about the organization. We're thinking about how we do things at our library. We're thinking about policies. We're thinking about operations. We're thinking through our energy, land, and water use. If your situation may vary. We've got libraries that completely control their building. Matt's sitting in front of a picture of his facility, which he has a little less control over. He doesn't own that building. He leases that space. So it's designed to be flexible, whether you own a building, you're a tenant, you're an academic library on a campus, and you wish you could control more things than you do, but encourages you to work with the folks that do have the control over those spaces and be an advocate for better things to happen in the future. Then it rolls into, you can see materials management, the stuff we buy, where did it come from? What's the impact on the environment? Where does it go at the end of useful life? There's a very fun activity called a waste audit, which I know sounds gross because it kind of is. But boy, do you learn a lot about what's going on in your building by doing that activity. And then it goes into more traditional library work, thinking about our partnerships, thinking about how we're involved in the community, where we're choosing to spend our energy outside of our buildings, and really thinking about how we're truly meeting the needs of our community, not guessing about what they need, but truly speaking with them, understanding where they're coming from, where the right level of effort is to put into some of the work we're already doing in libraries. So I just want to point out that a lot of the stuff in the certification program, it's not new things you have to do. It's really asking you to think differently about the things you're already doing. If you've got to make a decision about a new boiler, well, why not get the one that's more efficient? Why not think about investing in something that's going to save you money long term? You're already going to be planning programs for the public if you're in a public library. Why not align them with community needs? Why not help more people come to climate action in your community? You're already building a collection. Why not specialize in things that people didn't even know they wanted on these topics, right? So as you move further down, you're building the authenticity, you're building the framework, you're building the foundation you need to be a great partner in the community, to do work in the area of social equity, community resilience, partnering with folks, being part of planning, making sure the library is seen as a community asset in disaster preparedness and recovery planning. And then also making sure that you are, as an entity, going to be successful moving forward, thinking about your financial sustainability and your collections.
Rebecca, if I could join in just something quick, is that I think what we found too is some unintended consequences of people doing this work. They use it as a place to build their own internal teams or to go through a strategic planning process. They've used this whole framework, this whole program to do all sorts of wonderful things with it. So not only were they kind of solving some issues with telling that story better, but had all these other great consequences out of pulling some people together. San Diego County Library said they identified new talent in their organization, which is a giant multi-branch system. And we've had the smallest libraries tell us that they've used it as a way to pull a team together to try to refocus and get good work done.
And like Matthew, my organization has also gone through this program, and I can say it greatly impacted staff and board morale. We undertook this program during a time of great financial hardship, where we were not quite certain what the future looked like for our organization. And a lot of our staff felt really powerless, which I think is kind of a microcosm of how many of us feel today in the world in general. And so putting some decisions in their hands, them seeing data that the decisions and the choices we were making were having a positive impact, that they helped save the organization money over time. People always ask me, well, how much did it cost you to do all of this? You're paying a registration fee to get the support you need to get through the program. But the board they earmarked $500 a year to help me do the work we were going to do. I actually never touched it. We saved enough money from other choices we were making through the program that I was freeing up money all the time to invest in different ways. And then things we were going to do anyway didn't take new money because that money was already earmarked for it. So I don't think that should be a barrier to your thinking. And as Matt mentioned, we've had very large libraries and very small libraries serving very small communities be successful in the framework. So if you're interested in learning more about that, diving in, hearing more about the specific activities, what the stories are from folks that have gone through it, Alex is going to share the information in the chat of the next webinar that you can sign up for. And if you can't make it on that date, sign up anyway. We'll get you the recording to understand more what that experience feels like, what it can accomplish for you. It might solve some issues that you're dealing with now. And again, if you're not quite sure where to start, it provides the path for you. It's a methodology. It's not the only way to do it, but it's a way that many libraries are adopting that's really working for them. So just to recap here and then get you your info of how to access all this stuff we've been talking about this morning, already you can sign up for the newsletter, download that mobile app, sign up for our webinars. But I think now what you're getting access to that you haven't had before are all the things that Matt itemized, getting those sample policies, benchmarking your data, really being a more full participant in the community of practice and learning from more people across the country and world about some of these stuff. Ask your questions, throw the questions out there. How the heck heck do you do this? Plenty of people will jump in and help you. People are so generous in the library profession in general, but in particular, I think in this community of practice, they are excited about the questions and they're finding other people thinking about this stuff. So welcome. And then again, if you're in the certification program, you get access to an online dashboard to manage the work and walk you through the action items. Each action item has resources tied to it that help you do things. You have samples from other libraries, so you're not starting from scratch. You have a mentor assigned to you who's also gone through the program. It's a volunteer peer like Hazel, Matt, or myself, might be one of your mentors. So you've got a lot of support. And I think a very helpful thing is there's no clock ticking. You can take as long as you want to finish the certification program. You know, a lot of our libraries in the program had signed up before COVID, and then like COVID happened, and that certainly was not the priority, getting through the certification program. So some folks have taken a couple of years, others have finished in about 2 years. But your mileage may vary, and that's okay. That's basically the bottom line here. So I think at this point, I know I've asked Alex to put the link you're seeing on this page. And again, folks who are not in Maine, this also works for you, but you're going to be going to the Sustainable Libraries Initiative website, which is sustainablelibrariesinitiative.org, and then go to the specific page that Alex is putting in the chat for you. You're going to choose a membership type in that form and fill out the membership form. And just make sure when you get to the question about how did you hear about us, you select other and enter in your library association affiliation. That's how we know to waive the membership fee on the other end of that form. And then if you're interested in going into the certification program, I would encourage you to set up a time to talk to Alex about that. To learn more, he can give you a tour and orientation to that process and program more in depth than you'll get during the webinar even that's coming up later. And then that would be your entry point to moving forward with that. And that is certainly a big decision we understand for your institution, and you're going to need more information and talking points and hearing stories from other people. And that's what we're doing our best to provide you with. But if you've got questions that we haven't touched on, we are here to answer those, whether today, after the next webinar, or whenever they happen to occur to you.
Yeah, that'd be great.
So I'm thinking, Matt, that we're at the end of our prepared materials. Are we ready for questions from folks?
Yeah, bring it on.
All right.
What
and
can
Alex,
we
I
help
want
with?
to encourage you to unmute and help, and Hazel also, if you don't mind, if you want to be part of that, we'd welcome that.
We did have one question about do librarians who join as individuals also get the same benefits?
Yes, if you have an individual membership in your library association, yes, you do. But it would be one per library, I believe. Is that right, Alex?
Yes, yeah. If anyone has questions, feel free to unmute, or you can raise your hand.
I just want to say, while we're waiting for those humans to be brave, I get it. I didn't brush my hair, if it's any help. You still get to see me. Is that we also need to hear from you. Like, I know a bunch of rock stars on this call, and yeah, you're probably on desk multitasking. I get it. So no pressure. But those other SLI humans, we need to hear from you because you're doing really great work. And it's only all of us being a little brave and sharing that together that we're going to level each other up. And I know I have been so grateful to learn so much from folks who started out as colleagues and I now consider friends. And I know that that will be true of many of the humans already on this call, whether you're from Maine or not. So
I'll just share one story here in case there's folks working on their question or not, or you're just waiting for this to be over. That's okay too. We can end it. But I just wanted to say that when my organization started this work, I was not the executive director of my organization the way I am now. I was rank and file, and I was really passionate about the topic and really felt a need for us to do better on these topics. And I worked on a little pitch, and I went into the office I'm sitting in now with a different person behind this desk, and I made my case, and I thought it was super solid. And he just looked at me and he just said, no. He's just like, I don't see how this is aligning with the priorities we have right now. I don't understand how much it's going to cost. So no. And I was like, what? Like, how could you not want to do this work? Like, it's so important. And it was that classic thing where I didn't understand that he didn't know what I knew about climate action and what's going to happen in our region and some of the pressures on the world that we are contributing to. And I wasn't respectful of his frame, what he's trying to accomplish, what our board had told him to accomplish, what our financial situation was. And so if you are not the person in the driver's seat at your organization, just a couple of things to think about. How you introduce this topic can make or break your organizational commitment to it. No pressure. But I do think just thinking about who your audience is, how you talk about this issue. If you're in a more conservative area of the country, really respecting the vocabulary you're using. Some of the phrases are trigger phrases, but there's different ways to talk about this stuff and get to the same place. We're not beholden to using particular vocabulary. We just want to see good work done that makes the world a better place, which is what libraries are so good at. So just a few tips for you there. If you're the one making the case to a board, to a director, to a manager, just really think it through. Use that roadmap to sustainability to outline your thinking. And then think through your organizational lens of what your organization is currently contending with. How will it strengthen the position of your library? How will it make you be more seen as a leader? We have a wonderful board member who works in Florida, which is a difficult state to do some of this work, Nardia Cumberbatch. And she is in an academic setting, which she was saying that it's often hard to be visible in the campus environment as the library. But she said once they started doing work in this area, it caught the attention of the president of the college because they have goals in this area. And before you knew it, Nardia was being invited to sit at the table for conversations campus-wide about these topics. So understanding the political environment in which your library sits, being savvy about that is incredibly important. But the work itself through the certification program, or if you're kind of doing a DIY approach, it's hard to get there sometimes without making the case first.
Do you guys have resources for that exact problem? Like if we're coming at it from not the leader's seat, like I know you just mentioned using the roadmap to sustainability, but is there mentorship? I know Hazel is not in charge either. So like, do you guys have that as part of this?
Yeah, absolutely. That's definitely something. If you raise your hand and say, I'd love some help thinking this through, one of us will definitely step up to meet with you and help you with that. In the past, we've tried to do like templated talking points and it really doesn't work because the political environments are a little different from library to library and the position you're coming from is a little different. But yeah, Keelan, absolutely.
Okay, cool.
We have another question here from Anne Thomas at Goodall Library. Are you able to share what the financial cost is for certification without discounts during this webinar?
Yeah, absolutely. That's on the website. I think Alex is probably already looking for the link to put into the chat box, but it's on a sliding scale based on your operating budget. And then I think there's some, I know like in Vermont, there was some, I guess it was, I don't know if Margaret herself did it, but anyway, there is a grant from the Community Foundation in Vermont that underwrites libraries going through this. So if you're finding it's a financial hardship, I hope it's not, but if you do, there may be other sources to help you do that work. But I will say that if that registration fee is what's keeping your library from doing this, that's probably not the real reason you're being told no. They just don't want to do it or don't understand it, because the amount is not that much considering what you're going to get for it and get out of it. As I said, I made our registration fee back several times over through the money I saved and the work I did in the certification program.
So Rebecca, go ahead, Alex.
I was just going to share something that John Wilkinson shared in the chat. Great point about recovery planning. Please reach out to your local officials and state hazard mitigation officers for information on FEMA grants to address climate and other hazard mitigation actions. New York State DHSES is working with NYLA to engage library systems in community planning and projects. And he mentioned that they are working to help Smithtown recover.
See, it's happening in real time. People sharing information, connecting you with resources. This is really exactly what we're all about and trying to help you connect with what's going on locally in your state. We are so thrilled to see what's been going on with the New York Library Association now being more visible on some of these topics and other folks starting to recognize that in other agencies. And this was a great example of that. Our governor actually did something very, very interesting that I think you will be interested in other states. But the governor tasked our Department of Emergency Services and Homeland Security with information literacy briefings for New Yorkers. So when you think about, we've really owned the information literacy space for a very long time as library folks, but understanding that it's a Homeland Security issue, it's a disaster preparedness issue when folks aren't able to understand or access the information necessary to keep themselves safe or to help protect against some of the bad players out there that are trying to infiltrate some of our information network. So super fascinating alignment, not in an area we had thought of previously, but super smart, makes a lot of sense. And in addition, I think the national recognition by FEMA of libraries as disaster recovery centers, and something we found out through a national study we did 2 years ago, most libraries don't recognize that their public library facilities have been recognized through the Federal Stafford Act to prioritize recovery efforts in a library building so that more people can access services they need. So, we often lament no one thinks about libraries, but they have in this case, but we don't even know they have, so we can't take advantage of it. So learning more about these critical programs, resources that are already out there and connecting with them, it is not easy to cut through the red tape to get to some of the state and federal programs. And that's part of what this community can, I think, help do.
Hey, Rebecca, I just put in the chat the report from Dr. Kocher.
Oh, great.
Can you talk a little bit about that and why that's important?
Matt just did you a solid to Keelan, who was asking before about talking points and how to help with this topic. This is part of the toolbox for this. This is a paper that was written in advance of a recent climate action symposium hosted by the National Science Foundation or funded by the National Science Foundation. Dr. Kocher works for George Mason University, which partners with the Yale Climate Communications Project, and talking about how to frame conversations about climate change in a public health perspective. Because at the end of the day, when you strip away politics and life experiences, at the end of the day, when you ask people what they value, most people value safety, keeping their kids safe, thinking about their own safety and the neighborhood safety. And this really helps you think through what the most proven methodologies are for talking about climate change, given the potential audiences that you're talking to, and also takes a public health framework for talking about it. So it's taking it out of the political realm of climate change and really talking about a public health perspective that we're actually doing work in. I just found that paper very accessible, very usable, and something that I think a lot of us on this call would appreciate. So thanks, Matt, for sharing that. I noticed you didn't share my paper from that symposium, but the paper that I wrote for that symposium basically is your case statement if you're ever writing a grant proposal for why they should give you money for climate action work. So maybe we'll share that one too.
I'll look for it.
Thanks so much.
And I would say all of those can really, I'm going to speak to Maine because there's a lot of Mainers on this call, is that they can really be easily adapted to the specific Maine context, and we could workshop that or whatnot.
You have a real gift in Hazel and the team at the Curtis Memorial Library. They not only completed it, they just did an awesome job at it. So the examples they've created, you can learn from. The PR angle of this is something I think Curtis does a great job with too. Part of our design of the program is to raise your visibility, to improve your reputation, and to help people see you're a trusted partner. So we've got story after story of how work in the program has resulted in grant money flowing towards libraries, more respect flowing towards libraries, requests to be part of larger projects that you never could have imagined being a part of in the past have happened. I literally had a funder call me and offer me $25,000, and I was like, okay, like that's never happened before. But I think it's about something very critical that Matthew said early on in the program, which is that idea of really living your values out loud. And that draws people with similar values to your organization.
And you're showing that you care, right? Like, yeah, very outwardly that this is, you care about how you're spending the money that you're given to give public library service, that you're caring about the impact that those decisions have, and that you want your community to survive and thrive, right? And it's a very outward approach to that. So while sometimes we're a little more insular and we don't say that, you can't have any greater expression than doing this work and being that resource for people when they're in a time of need.
I'm seconding Hazel being an inspiring rock star, and then look at Hazel turning it right back to all of you, because that's how we feel. Finding like-minded people in our profession that get it, want to do this work is like so exciting. And the journey that Matthew and I in particular, but now Alex and Hazel as well have been on over the past 12 years, it's amazing. The friends we've made, the things that have happened just because we put ourselves out there and said we wanted to work on this. It's literally taken us across the world. We've won an award in Greece. We went to Iceland. Like we meeting people in Canada now. Like it's just so cool to see people come together and see the power of libraries doing work in this area and being known for doing work in this area. So I hope today's webinar was useful to you. You've got a better sense of what your new membership benefit can do for you. We hope you take advantage of it early. Please don't hesitate to reach out with questions. Like the earlier question, if you need help making the case to administration, we're here to help with that.
And welcome.
Yeah.
Thank you
That's it.
so much for being here. So excited to connect.
So Alex has put his contact info in the chat. I hope everyone grabs that before you sign off here today. If you got any questions, Alex is your go-to to help with the membership form. If you want to set up a time to talk about the certification program in depth. And I know Alex is going to follow up with the information about the webinar coming up on the certification program. So if you want to learn more about that, join us.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Good. Thank you.